Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us to explore what it means to form a rule of life. My name is Nathan Carlton, and I'm the worship leader here at Trinity Church in Papillion. And I'm joined with Dave Parrish. Dave, what do you do at Trinity?
I work part-time as associate pastor at Trinity.
Excellent. Man, well, we are so excited to get to share something that has grown to be very important to us with all of you. The rule of life. It sounds daunting. It sounds sometimes quite grand, maybe a bit overbearing, but it really has the potential to enrich our lives, to grow our relationships with God and with others, to help us to love them as we are called to do as Christians. So some of you may be asking, just what is a rule of life? Maybe you've heard that term before, maybe you haven't. But a rule of life is not as dense or as complex as it sounds. It's actually rooted in simplicity. But before we dive into this definition, I think it'd be important for us to acknowledge the elephant in the room for us in our society in this present moment. Our world today is more connected and integrated than it's ever been. Examples would include email, social media, smartphones. We have them right in our pocket every day, almost all of the time, except when we're asleep. We also have Wi-Fi. We have access to the internet anywhere and everywhere. From the moment we wake up in the morning, we go out to a coffee shop or a restaurant or a store. More often than not, there will be Wi-Fi available. And we're always just interconnected with certain aspects of our society. And that's the goal of things like social media, is to do this. However, it seems, at least to me, that the more connected we become to others and to the world in which we all live, we become more fragmented, more exhausted, and more empty. It's like a current, like in a river or an ocean, a current of communication and information that sweeps us off our feet, carries us downstream, and tosses us roughly into a pool of questions, a seeming lack of time, and a nagging sense that there has to be more to life than this. At least that's been my experience. And I would dare say it's probably some of you guys' experiences as well. So even in Jesus's day, this was not far from the minds of people who really were in many ways like us. Jesus observed this and addressed it in many of his teachings, and perhaps most famously in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. And I want to read from the Message translation. I think it really renders the human experience apart from rest in God just very poignantly. He says this in the Message translation. Jesus says, "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." And I know it, when I hear that, I think, can it really be this good? Is the good news, the gospel, Jesus' saving work in the world, is it really that good? And Dave and I are here to tell you today that yes, it is that good. And we want to invite you to be a part of this, come on this journey of discovery, and share this with you. So Christians throughout history have all struggled with this same experience in their own way, in their own culture. And fortunately for us, they developed a means of dealing with this and coping with it. And it is the aforementioned rule of life. So at first glance, it does sound a bit intimidating, especially in a culture that is very suspicious of anything with the word rule in it. However, a rule of life has the power to radically transform our lives, not because of the things we do, but because of how the rule we put in place, our rule of life, focuses our daily routines, our decisions, and our interactions on God. And it allows us to be open to his transforming grace. So appropriately applied, a rule of life centers our focus on Jesus and his teachings and help us to take his life and his teachings as our template, model, or pattern, you might say. It leads us to ask this question: how would Jesus live if he were me? And I think that's very important. How would Jesus live if he were me? There's a lot to be learned from that statement. So the rule of life originated in monasteries over 1,000 years ago. It goes way back into the past, and a rule was defined like this: a schedule and set of practices to order your life around the way of Jesus in a community of others. It was a way to keep from getting sucked into the hurry, busyness, noise, and distraction of regular life. A way to slow down, a way to live into what really matters. And as John Mark Comer would say, what Jesus called abiding. So that past quote was from his book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which has been a huge source of inspiration for us as we've approached these talks here. So the term rule comes from a Latin word, regula, literally translated as a straight piece of wood. So think like a ruler. But if any of you guys enjoy wine, if you've ever been to a vineyard and you've seen trellises, that's also the idea that's communicated here. A vine, in order to grow up and expose fruit to the sunlight, it has to have a guiding presence or force to shape its growth. And that's exactly what a trellis does. It allows the plants to not remain close to the ground, but to make their way up towards the sun so that they might receive the nutrients that they get from sunlight and bear just really great fruit to make quality grapes. And so a rule of life, when we think of it like a trellis, it becomes way less about obligation and way more about an invitation to be exposed to the light that God brings to our lives and to let that promote growth. Jesus even talks about this in the Gospel of John, chapter 15. He says, I am the vine, you are the branches. And if you remain in me, I will remain in you. He's drawing on this imagery that they would have understood pertaining to a vineyard. So if we structure our lives in this way so that we grow to be more like Jesus, we will see immeasurable benefits, not just in our inner life with peace and joy and hope, but we will experience an outpouring of love because we realize how much God loves us. That will inspire us to want to love other people with that same love, to care for them in every circumstance, to meet their needs, to respect their emotions, their relationships, and to recognize the image of God in them. So this reinforces an idea so often lost in modern conversations about Christian faith. Here's another quote from John Mark Comer. Following Jesus is something you do, a practice as much as faith. Building relationships takes time, so why would it be any different with our relationship with God? A rule of life helps us to structure our priorities so that we can spend time abiding in God's presence so that we might be changed and live a life that transforms the world around us. So that's just a bit of a nutshell kind of summary of the history of a rule of life to give you an idea of where we're coming from with this and why we believe it is so incredibly beneficial. And in the next video, we're going to share our own stories of how we came into this. Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about the rest of this time we have together?
Yeah, I'd love to just give a preview of some of the things we'd like to cover over the course of these videos. So, and thank you, Nathan, for that great background, some history, and an invitation to this lifestyle of abiding in Jesus, of being with God and enjoying the presence of God. So this is the intro video. We have 4 other videos planned out right now. In the next video, we'll be looking at the rule of life as a gift, that God has given us this incredible gift. And in that, like Nathan said, we'll be sharing our own stories of how we've fallen into this gift of grace. In the third video, we will be looking at taking a life inventory. And in that, we'll be just kind of looking at the things in our lives that bring us joy, the things that energize us and recharge us. And then also looking at 4 key areas of work, of rest, of relationships, of prayer, and how we can be intentional of including those 4 areas into our plan for how we want to spend time with God and abide in Jesus. In the video after that, we will be looking specifically at some of the spiritual disciplines or some of the practices and habits, kind of taking the theoretical and the nice thoughts of all of this and putting it into some concrete practices that we've been experiencing in our own lives and would invite you to also consider and practice in your life. And then we'll wrap it all up, kind of pulling all of the pieces pieces together as we look at building a rule of life. What does this mean? And I want to say that, there might be some things that I've done that Nathan enjoys, and things that he's done that maybe don't work for me, and vice versa. So in all of this, think of these as tools that you might put in your spiritual life toolkit. And we'd love for you to give a try to these different practices, but you may find that what works for somebody else isn't especially meaningful for you, and that's okay. So we encourage you to experiment liberally in this, to try some things on, and the goal isn't to do a certain number of practices or do practices in a certain way, but to find what helps you to connect with God in the way that God has created you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for being interested in this. And we're very excited to go on this journey with you to explore the gift that is a rule of life.